Good evening and welcome to Biz1st Review 360, where we bring you this week's top business stories. I am Ramesh Irugal Bandara. Now, this week was dominated by the 2016 Sri Lankan Economic Summit. There were plenty of headlines made throughout the two-day summit, and one of the key headlines that were made was JVP leader MP Andrukumar Dissanayake saying that they are not against the privatization of loss-making enterprises that do not have a direct impact on the ordinary citizen.
Raising a round of applause from the private sector, the leader of the Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna told the Economic Summit 2016, organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, that a villager in a remote part of the island will not care if the loss-making Sri Lankan Airlines is privatized. However, Dissanayake insisted that the government should have a stake in public enterprises that are closely linked with the day-to-day lives of citizens.
මේ කුඩා වෙළඳපොළ සහ කුඩා ආර්ථිකයක ස්ථාවරභාවය තුලනයත් ආරක්ෂා කර ගැනීමේදී රාජ්‍යයේ මැදිහත් වීම ආර්ථිකයේ සෑම අධ්‍යයනයකදීම වැදගත් කියන එක තමයි අපගේ ස්ථාවරය. සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාවගේ ජීවිතය සමග ගැටගැහුණු ශේෂ්ත්‍ර තිබෙනවා. ඒ ශේෂ්ත්‍රවලින් ඒ ශේෂ්ත්‍රවල තුලනය, ඒ ශේෂ්ත්‍රයේ ගුණාත්මකභාවය, ඒ ශේෂ්ත්‍රයේ ආරක්ෂාව වෙනුවෙන් අනිවාර්යෙන්ම राज्य पंगुවක් එම ශේත්‍රය ආරක්ෂා කරගත යුතුයි. උදාහරණයක් ගෙනාවා මූල්‍ය ශේත්‍රය, බලශක්ති ශේත්‍රය, අපි ගත්තොත් පාරිභෝගික ශේත්‍රය, මේ ආදී ශේත්‍ර ගණනාව. ඒ වගේම මා නම් කොට නොකියව මේ ආයතනවල නම් කොට අපිට තෝරා ගන්න පුළුවන් මේක. සමහර ශේත්‍ර තිබෙනවා. ඒ ශේත්‍රවල රාජ්‍ය භාගයක් රාජ්‍ය पंगුවක්, රාජ්‍ය තරඟකාරීත්වයක් පවත්වා ගත යුතු නැද්ද? ඒක මම හිතන්නේ අපිට සංවාදයක් හරහා විසඳාගත හැකි කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරනවා. සමහර ශේත්‍ර තිබෙනවා එය රාජ්‍යයේ මහා දැවැන්ත මුදල් සම්භාරයක් භාණ්ඩාගාරයෙන් යොදවලා ඒ ආයතනයේ පවත්වාගෙන යාම හරහා සාමාන්‍ය ජනතාවගේ ජන ජීවිතයේ ආරක්ෂාවට හෝ තුලනයට හෝ පැවැත්මට හෝ මොකද්ද කරලා තිබෙන දායකත්වය. එහෙම ගත්තම මම හිතනවා ආයතන අපිට තෝරාගත හැකි කියලා. ඒවා කිසිසේත්ම ජනතාවගේ ජීවිතයත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ නොවුණු ඒ ආයතනයන් වලින් රාජ්‍ය අත්තරීම කිසිසේත්ම අයෝග්‍ය කරුණකට අපි සලකන්නේ නැහැ.
Sri Lanka is currently looking at ways to reform and restructure loss-making state-owned enterprises to reduce the burden on the treasury and the taxpayer. However, Dissanayake said his party opposes the government's plans to salvage Sri Lankan Airlines, the island's national carrier.
ලංකා ආයතනයේ ඍණ ආයතනය. එතකොට දැන් ආණ්ඩුවේ යෝජනාවේ මේ ඍණ ආයතනමය දෙනව නම් කමක් නැහැ. දැන් ආණ්ඩුවේ යෝජනාව කුමක්ද? ආණ්ඩුව දැනට සාකච්ඡා වෙමින් තිබෙන යෝජනාව තමයි එයා ලංකා ආයතනයේ සතු තිබෙන වගකීම් ප්‍රමාණය ශ්‍රී ලංකා භාණ්ඩාගාරයේ බාර ගන්නවා. වගකීම් ප්‍රමාණය ශ්‍රී ලංකා භාණ්ඩාගාරයේ බාර අරගෙන එතකොට ඒ වත්කම් ප්‍රමාණය සුද්ධව ඉතුරු වෙනවා. ඒ වත්කම් ප්‍රමාණය පැවරීම තමයි සිදු කරන්න දැනට මා දන්නා පරිදි යෝජනාව තිබෙන්නේ. මම කියන්නේ එහෙම කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. අපිට අර්බුදයේ තිබෙන වගකීම් ප්‍රමාණය නම් භාණ්ඩාගාරයේ ඇයි ඒ වගකීම බාර අරගෙන වත්කම් විතරක් අපි දෙන්නේ. ඒතර භාණ්ඩාගාරයට වත්කම් වගකීම් ප්‍රමාණය බාර ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් රජයටම පුළුවන් වෙන්න ඕන එහෙම නේද? ඒක කළමනාකරණයත් බාර ගන්න. ඒ නිසා දැන් ඇති වී තිබෙන යෝජනාවට අපි පක්ෂ නැහැ. ඒකට විරුද්ධයි. මොකද අපි වගකීම් ප්‍රමාණය භාණ්ඩාගාරයට පවරාගත යුතු නැහැ.
The argument of the government is that once the management of the airline, which has accumulated liabilities over $3.25 billion is taken over by the private sector, the treasury would stop accumulating new losses. Dissanayake agreed that a change in mindset is needed to support government efforts to better manage public enterprises, but questioned the effectiveness of the strategy to communicate ongoing reforms to the public.
අපි ජනතාව වෙත ගෙන යා යුතුව තිබෙනවා පණිවිඩයක්. මේ ආර්ථිකයේ මා යටකීම මූලික කරුණු දැක්වීමේදී ඉදිරිපත් කළාද අර්බුදයන්ට අපි පිළිතුරු සොයා ගැනීමකින් තොරව අපිට ඉස්සරහට යන්න පුළුවන්. අපි මේ ණය අර්බුදයට පිළිතුරු සොයාගත යුතුයි. මායි. ඒකට මම අහනවා දැන් ඔබතුමාලා සතුව තිබෙනවාද වර්තමාන රජයේ සමස්ත ආර්ථිකයේ පිළිබඳව සමස්ත පැතිකඩක් තියෙනවා කිසි. මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයා විසින් ජනාධිපතිවරයා විසින් අග්‍රාමාත්‍යවරයා විසින් අපේ ආර්ථිකයේ තියෙන මෙතන අපි අවුරුදු 5කින් ආර්ථිකය ගෙන යනවා මෙතෙන්ට. අපි නිෂ්පාදන අපි මෙතෙන්ට ගෙන ආයිත්. ඒ කියන්නේ රජයේ තමයි මේ ආර්ථික සැලසුම සකස් කරන්නේ. අන්නේ සැලසුමේ කොටසක් හැටියට නම් මේ අනු කොටස් පෞද්ගලීකරණ වෙන අනු කොටස් එන්නේ අපි ඒකට මුහුණ දෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි පළවෙනි ප්‍රශ්නේ මුහුණ දීලා තියෙන දේ තමයි මේ ආර්ථික සැලසුම කුමක්ද කියලා ජනතාව ගාව නැහැ චිත්‍රය. බහුතරයක් කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ අමාත්‍යවරු ගාවත්. ඇත්තට තමයි. ඔබතුමා මාසමක එකඟ වෙයි. ඉතින් සමස්ත ආණ්ඩු යාන්ත්‍රණයේ ප්‍රධාන වගකීම උසරන කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලය තුලවත් ආණ්ඩුවේ පොදු ආර්ථික ප්‍රතිපත්තියේ ඉදිරි දැක්ම පිළිබඳව සමාලෝචනයක් ඇගීමක් සකස් කිරීමක් නැතුව අපි කොහොමද ජනතාවට ඒක ගෙනියන්නේ? මෙතන තමයි ප්‍රශ්නේ ඉර වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මම හිතනවා කුඩා ඒවට ජනතාවගේ විරෝධය නෙවෙයි සමස්ත ආර්ථිකයේ ඒකට විසඳුම් මොනවද? ඒකෙන් ජනතාවට ප්‍රතිලාභ ලැබෙන්නේ මොකද්ද කියලා ප්‍රශ්නයක්. ඒ නිසා ඔබ කියන එකට මම එකඟයි. මොකද්ද? අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපිට මේ ජනතාව වෙනස් කළ යුතුයි. මේ ජනතාව වෙනස් කරන්න. හැබැයි මේ ජනතාව වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්කම තිබෙන්නේ ඊට වඩා උසස් දේශපාලන ව්‍යාපාරයකට. හැබැයි බොහෝ දේශපාලන ව්‍යාපාර ගත්තාම ජනතාවටත් වඩා යටින් ඉන්නේ. ඒක කොහොම වෙනස් කරන්නේ?
In a major indictment on the government's management of Sri Lanka's debt-burdened economy, top economists told a summit attended by President Maithripala Sirisena as well as Finance Minister Ravi Karnanayaka that their economic policies were ad hoc, unpredictable and inconsistent. In the absence of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is on a tour to Indonesia, President Maithripala Sirisena and Minister Ravi Karnanayaka came under severe criticism for state intervention on price controls. We have an exclusive interview with Professor Razin Sali, who analysed the state of the country and its economy.
Senior economists Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena and Professor Razin Sali slammed economic policies of the Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe unity government, calling state intervention in price controls supreme idiocy. The duo made hard-hitting remarks while both President Maithripala Sirisena and Finance Minister Ravi Karnanayaka were in attendance.
There has been the supreme idiocy of extra price controls, which I thought was something that we had left behind in 1977. But in addition to what was announced in the first budget, there have been new price controls. The government, by creating inflation and by having import protection, puts burdens on consumers and then puts new burdens on producers and entrepreneurs in the form of tax controls. The message sent out is that this is about market busting rather than market facilitating. It sends very mixed and contradictory signals. Monetary policy was, in my view, far too loose following the excesses of this fiscal policy. I don't want to go into the detail here. I welcome very much the excellent appointment of the new governor. I think he understands the situation very well, as his comments displayed. The task of central banking is fundamentally to ensure macroeconomic stability at its core, price stability, not to compound the errors of fiscal policy.
Recent price controls of essential goods and ad hoc tax measures also came under heavy flack. The government made continuous amendments to the 2016 budget and slapped tax hikes without the parliament approval, triggering uncertainty in the market and among investors.
My assessment is that the excesses of the Rajapaksa years have not been fundamentally corrected so far. And in some respects have got worse. Let me make a quick comment about fiscal policy and then about monetary policy. We had, in my view, two very bad budgets last year. There have been excessive increases in public sector spending, on salary increases, on new entitlements. The tax system has continued to deteriorate. The IMF program is supposed to reverse that process, but we have seen some unwelcome developments subsequently. There have been too many ad hoc measures on taxation. Business is understandably very vexed because of high levels of unpredictability and uncertainty that continue from the last regime.
Former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, addressing the forum, said the government's fiscal and monetary policies were contradictory.
But unfortunately, what we see is some of the policy measures that he is taking would be counter to the central bank's policy rate increase immediately. For example, the granting of this duty-free car permits to public servants, because the interest rates were raised by the central bank in order to make the money more expensive for people, so that we would be looking at the expense when it comes to importing goods from the rest of the world, and therefore he wanted to maintain a certain stability in the external sector. But when we allow the public servants to import cars, and we have practically now about 500,000 public servants who would be entitled to this particular car permit, what we are doing is we are actually negating the interest rate policy increase done by the central bank. The result would be that the central bank will be forced to have a second round of policy rate increase.
Following Professor Salih's indictment on the management of the economy, Biz1st Review 360 caught up with him for an exclusive chat.
There isn't a reform program. Secondly, I think there have been a lot of unfortunate appointments to key positions. So you need the right people who are clean, competent and professional in the right positions. The government lacks a system of coordinating economic policy across ministries and agencies to select priorities and then see things through to implementation and delivery. That needs to be put in place. And then this is a democracy. It's a very complicated democracy. These reforms can't be simply pushed through by diktat. Yes, they do require firm leadership, but they require persuasion and consent as well. And the message needs to be got across to the Sri Lankan people, especially outside Colombo, of the urgency of these reforms and that they're for the people's benefit. So all of these things need to be done at the political level in order to get the economic reforms done.
The Oxford Business Group, a prestigious global publishing, consultancy and research firm, has put Sri Lanka in the spotlight with the launch of their first independent report on the country.
Launching its first independent country report on Sri Lanka, the Oxford Business Group said the island's development strategy should focus more on the services sector, which has potential to propel economic growth.
First of all, we're convinced that as a relatively small economy surrounded by giants such as India and China, Sri Lanka's development path has to be based on exports. With low-value manufacturing model now outdated, the focus should be on new services such as hospitality, IT, health, food processing, and of course business process management.
Among other things, the report looks at the linkage between the booming hospitality sector and the government's plan for boosting economic growth.
Airline movements suggest we are on track, with 26% growth in passenger movement since 2011. This is still below Sri Lanka's potential and has a lot to do with the lack of substantial growth in tourism sector. We would like to see more internal flights to regional airports to support demand for quick access to places like Kandy and Nuwara. With improved connectivity, Sri Lanka already has the product the world's middle-class travelers are looking for. It has adventure, heritage, it has nature, beaches, and unique culture. Sri Lanka's natural appeal is indisputable. Yet as a brand, it's still in the shadow of more famous tourism destinations in Asia, such as Bali, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, and now the Philippines. The government, in our view, should be prioritizing the hospitality sector and work closely with the Maldives to create a golden triangle for high spenders to derive at least $1,000 per day per tourist, with this sector easily accounting for more than 10% of GDP going forward and becoming one of the most sustainable foreign revenue generators.
Given Sri Lanka's strategic location in the Indian Ocean, the Oxford Business Group said advances in transport infrastructure and logistics will enable the country to build on its status as a global shipping hub.
ASEAN expects a dip in growth. More on this after a short commercial break. Welcome back. This is Biz1st Review 360 with me, Ramesh Irugal Bandara. In international business news tonight, ASEAN countries are expecting a dip in growth from 4.7% in 2015 to 4.5% this year.
Economic growth in ASEAN countries is expected to dip to 4.5% in 2016 from 4.7% last year due to China's slowdown and uncertainties over Britain leaving the European Union. Economic ministers meeting in Laos, which holds the ASEAN chairmanship this year, said in a joint statement that growth in the 10-nation group's $2.4 trillion economy should recover to 4.7% next year due to strong private and public consumption and improved efficiency in infrastructure. The region is exposed to continued moderation in the Chinese economy, to uncertainties over the new relationship between the UK and the EU after Brexit. Reuters, quoting the ASEAN statement, said,
Should the Colombo port have an independent regulator? Here are the views expressed by experts in the shipping field in this regard.
There is interterminal competition. This is actually one very specific feature in Colombo. You see, our competitors are monopolies. Port of Singapore, Port of Salalah, West Port of Malaysia, PTP, they are all operated by one party, whereas we have 3 competitive operators. So the good is that there is competition between operators for advancement in technology and also quality of service. But the bad is that individual aims take priority. Cannibalization takes front stage. It's easy to cannibalize the next door neighbor than looking at a market outside the region. The ugly is the price competition. Price is used as a tool of competition, and the shipping lines start setting one terminal against the other. And the end result is the port sector would have such a low level of pricing that investors would think twice before investing in such a port. Too much price competition can kill this port.
That competition somehow had, ugly outcomes, and that, that will drive business down. On the other hand, I would have thought, creating those efficiencies due to competition would then together, as the different competing terminals, would be able to attract greater container traffic into the port, because driving that costs down and driving the efficiencies up somehow, I thought would be beneficial.
SLPA cannot continue as a terminal operator as well as a regulator. SLPA's Act provides sufficient laws to regulate the industry, but unfortunately SLPA is unable to do that because it itself is a competitor. If it uses any other tools, it would be termed as anti-competitive. Therefore, it cannot. So, in the short term, we have pointed out the requirement of an independent regulator who will sit above all of us and regulate the entire industry and create a level playing field, so that SLPA would not be, during the time SLPA remains as the operator and the port operator and the port owner, it would not be able to go into anti-competitive practices like using tools that are only available to SLPA.
Is Sri Lanka doing enough to promote itself as a top tourist destination in comparison to promotions being run by other countries in our region? We have more on this right after this short commercial break. Welcome back. This is Biz1st Review 360. Tonight on Speak Your Mind, we bring you remarks by Andrew Fairley, the Director of Tourism Australia, on what steps they have taken to promote Australia as a tourist destination.
So we set an aspirational goal in 2010 that by 2020, all of our tourism would deliver $115 billion in revenue. That's domestic and international, and we are on track to do that. Now, let me make some comments initially about the importance of ensuring that you know what you want to be as a tourism destination. Every country has to have a very clear view about what that light on the hill is, what it is that you actually want to be, why you're here in that tourism sector. You've got to have a vision that's relevant, that's motivating, that's going to tell your potential visitors just what it is that's going to distinguish you from those other 190 destinations who are all desperate to get their business. So it's not just about image creation. It's critical to understand what are the attributes that the visitor perceives as being important, that makes you unique, that makes you differentiated. It's got to be a vision that's clear, it's got to be simple, it's got to cut through, and it's got to be memorable. And our vision in Australia is for us to be the most desirable and memorable destination on earth. So we do a lot of research in our various core markets. 2 years ago, our brand was very much around a single message. There's nothing like Australia. But our research was indicating that travellers were becoming much more sophisticated and discerning. They were looking for tailor-made experiential travel built around provenance, authenticity, individuality and diversity. Now, we know that the world is a very mature international tourism market. So there's fierce competition at that top end for the affluent traveller's dollar. And we have empowered consumers that have instant, unedited personal access to everything and everybody. Purchasers want to seek out new and novel tourism places and to forensically then drill into what makes them special. So to give us a better chance of reaching those consumers, we've broadened our message to focus on special interest or niche offerings in our tourism panoply. That's led to the development of what we call our supporting pillars, to highlight our strong consumer assets, our luxury, our premium offerings, our sporting and major events, our indigenous tourism and our business tourism. More than 50% said it's incredibly important that a holiday destination that I go to is safe and secure. That was the absolute number one in every market. We then ascertained that great food, wine and local cuisine was a major influence on holiday decision making. But only 26% of those people who hadn't been to Australia regarded us as being a place that had good food and wine. But then, after they visited us and we polled them again, 60% of them said Australia has great food and wine, and they put us second in the world behind France. That confirmed an opportunity for us to focus on international destinations, to focus on our food and wine offering. And so we branded that Restaurant Australia. The message was that universally throughout our country you could enjoy spectacular food, wine and local culinary experiences. The international perception of Australia as a food and wine destination has moved from 10th down to 6th. And more importantly, the spend in our food and wine businesses in Australia has increased by 25% now in the last year to $1 billion a year. That's an incredible outcome from our perspective. It was partly achieved through direct engagement with the promoted market and the markets, but it was also achieved because we brought out 86 of the world's leading food and wine writers, and we exposed them to all parts of the country so they could write about the breadth and depth of our food and wine experience. So it's been an extraordinary success on any measure. But this year we've expanded our supporting pillars to focus on the experiences offered by our beaches, our coastlines and our waterways. And that sits alongside Restaurant Australia, and we see it playing to one of our fundamental strengths.
Well, that's all the news we have for you tonight. Do find us on YouTube at Newsfirst.lk and on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Biz1st Review 360 to stay up to date on all the business stories happening throughout the week. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Ramesh Bandara. Have a pleasant weekend.
ලක්මවගේ සදාදරණීය දරුවන් බව